Hello again. If you're watching this video, I thank you for coming back, and I hope you enjoyed my first video, the BPD intro video. On this one, I would like to discuss a couple of subjects. One of them is the 9 symptoms of BPD, and the other one is about the birth of my daughter, which has BPD, and I would like to talk about things that evolve around her at her birth and why I think that maybe that might have caused what her BPD is. And first of all, I want to talk about the 9 symptoms of BPD, or borderline personality disorder. And you have to have 5 or more of these to be diagnosed as having bipolar or borderline personality disorder. A lot of people do get the two confused, bipolar and borderline, because they are a lot alike. They have a lot of symptoms that are similar, but a BPD person, borderline personality disorder, has a lot more extensive symptoms than bipolar. So, let's begin. The first symptom is abandonment. It could be real or imagined. A person who has this is afraid to be alone, or afraid to have a partner or loved one leave them, such as when they go to work of a morning, or go to school, or anything like that. Or they could be imagining that they're going to be left alone when they're not going to be. They overreact at either one of these. They think that the person who is leaving is not going to come back, and they want them to stay near them all the time. But even if they have a negative outlook toward this person, they still want them to be around. That's where the title of the book, I Hate You, Don't Leave Me, comes from. Because they could be very, very negative toward this person, but they don't want them to leave, or, make them feel like they're going to be left. The second symptom is unstable relationships. Most BPDs can't keep a relationship because they are, for lack of a better term, flighty. They have really bad mood swings, and they do what's called splitting. BPD people don't split on everybody. This is when 1 minute they will be okay with the person that they're with, but the next minute they will not be okay, and they may be hurling insults or threats or very aggressive behavior toward them. And then they turn back to being nice and sorry for what they did, and etc. Number 3 is an unclear or shifting self-image, which means that they don't really know what to think about themselves. That some people will think a whole lot about themselves. They'll think that they're super smart, super beautiful, super talented in all areas, especially singing or music or writing or anything like that. And they can do anything that they want, but usually don't. And this affects all of their relationships, even with their family or partners or husbands or wives or children. And they usually, because of this, go through a lot of jobs because their first reaction to a negative out thing in a job is to quit. Even if it's just they've only been there one day, they don't want to work out problems, they'd rather quit than to do that. And the next thing is that they don't hold a relationship with a person very well, such as a boyfriend girlfriend relationship or a lesbian gay relationship or a daughter mother, you know, sister brother, whichever way you want to go. They usually don't have stable relationships in this area. And they usually berate the person a lot, and they would rather insult them than to be nice to them. They're usually jealous of their talents or what they can do or the way they look. My BPD daughter doesn't like it when people can do things better than her, such as write or sing or dress or lose weight or anything like that, exercise, anything that a person can do better than her. She hates that, and it really affects her. She has alienated a lot of people with that attitude. And also, it affects their religion. They can't decide on what religion to have, and they often disagree with every religion. And a lot I have found in my studies and in my experiences, a lot of them become atheists because they disagree so much with the religions of the day, and they'd rather be atheists than to try to find a religion that fits them. And also, their goals and sexual identity is unclear. They may set a goal and be very, very excited about that goal, and then all of a sudden it falls through. They lose interest in it, they don't want to do it, they hate doing it, and just for instance, recently my daughter wanted to go to Nashville to audition for The Voice, and all of a sudden she lost interest in the whole thing and she didn't go. She just all of a sudden didn't go. And she does a lot of buying tickets to concerts and then decides not to go, or she gets sick. And the sickness is usually imagined. She's not really sick, she just doesn't want to face the reality of going to a concert. Even that bothers her. Okay, the next symptom, number 4, is being impulsive. That one is a bad one because they're usually impulsive in spending money, gambling, drinking, doing drugs. Some people are even sexually impulsive. They will have several partners that they're not really close to. They just want to have sex with them and that's it. And they just keep that up over and over and over again. And it's really bad, especially when you have something like money impulsiveness, because the person can either spend their own money till they're broke, and then they can go to somebody else and say, I need money. And they can keep spending and spending until they're broke. And our daughter really had a problem with trying to suck us dry because she was spending her allowance that we give her. And then she was also coming to us and wanting money after that. And it was really hard on our finances before we set our foot down and said, we've got to do this differently. But it's still a hard row to hoe because she doesn't really understand very good. And we are working on that and hoping someday we can solve it somehow. And another thing that's bad is that a person of this disorder wants to harm themselves. Now, that is usually cutting. They'll take themselves and they'll take a knife and they'll cut their arms, or they'll cut their legs or face or anything. And they'll also burn themselves with cigarettes and anything to release endorphins so that they can feel something. Even feeling pain makes them feel good. And it's a really bad thing. And around 10% of BPDs will actually kill themselves. But this doesn't happen that often. There's 2.5 million people diagnosed every year with borderline personality disorder, and 10% of them might kill themselves. It doesn't mean they will. They mainly just make empty threats. They don't actually go through with it. They make the threats as part of curing the abandonment issues. They say that they're going to kill themselves so that you'll come back and say, oh, please don't do that. No, I don't want you to do that. I'll do whatever you want. But actually, it's just a manipulative movement, which they're very good at too. They will manipulate you into anything. And that's not a good thing either, because you get to where you don't believe them. You don't know what they're going to do. You don't know why they're doing it. And number 6 is extreme emotional swings. And that's where you get confused with the bipolar disorder, because our daughter, when she was little, usually during the morning, she would be really happy and joking and playing and laughing, and she would do it to such an extreme that we would say, well, looks like she's got to be crashing this evening. And she would do just that. She would crash and she would cry and she would get mad, and it was just so terrible because to see her swing from one way to another. As she got older, she would swing back and forth during the day, and that's what she does now. She'll may start out really good in the morning and then get mad and then realize that she got mad, and then she'll want you to forgive her, or she'll get mad and want you to apologize for something that you didn't do. And that's a hard thing, because she'll accuse people of doing certain things that they didn't do. And then she says, I'm not going to speak to you until you apologize to me, when there was nothing to apologize to begin with. When she is the one that should have been doing the apologizing. And I think because of this, they have a feeling of emptiness. It's a constant feeling of emptiness, like there's a hole in their soul, like it's a hole that nothing can fill. And I think sometimes that's why they spend like they do, or they gamble like they do, because they have to fill that hole. And they have to do something to not feel empty. So they may drink a lot of alcohol, they may do drugs, lots of different things that could fill that hole. And not necessarily love will fill that hole or finding the right person. It's usually because of just an unusual feeling of emptiness. And the one I see as the worst is the explosive anger. My daughter has had several incidents where she has just gotten very, very angry. And this hasn't just been at home, it's been in public. At home, she got mad at me one time, for instance. This is just one incident. Uh, and she decided that I didn't deserve anything. I didn't deserve to have possessions. I didn't deserve to have anything. So she collected up all my things that I owned, like ornaments, pictures, paintings, clothes, uh, just everything. And she bagged them all up and threw them in the garbage. She broke things that I had. Uh, I had a house, a Christmas house that played music. She broke it and threw candles on it to break it even more. Uh, she just threw out, it was over $3,000 worth of items. And it was just terrible because it really, really upset me that she did this. And then I found out later that the biggest part of it she didn't even remember. And then she wanted to replace all the items that she had gotten rid of or broken. And I told her that I didn't want them back. I didn't want them replaced. I just, I just wanted to go on with my life. But I think anger is one of the worst things because when they get mad, they're more apt to harm you, like hit you or slap you or punch you or something like that. I've never ever heard of a BPD killing somebody. I don't think that happens. They just want to hurt you. They want to throw things at you. They want to harm you in some other way. For instance, my daughter had a big, thick book that she had bought that had to do with house cleaning in spring, and she was wanting her dad to do it. But he didn't have time because he works all the time. So she took the book down while he was sleeping and she threw it at his head, but luckily she missed and it woke him up. And later on, she said, well, he laid it beside his bed on the end table, and she said, that's really sweet of him that he's reading that book. I said, well, he ought to. You threw it at him. And she said that she didn't remember doing that. That's one of her bad things, is that when she gets mad like that, gets angry, she'll black out and she won't remember doing the bad things that she did. Just like one time she threatened to throw a big candle in a glass case at his head, and she said she didn't remember it either. And it's really hard when you're living with somebody like that because you don't know when they're going to really, really harm you. And one other thing is feeling suspicious of somebody. They are constantly thinking that you're lying to them, either lying to them or plotting against them, or as my daughter says, I like to gaslight her, which means you make them believe that a certain condition exists when it doesn't. It's from the movie Gaslight. If you ever want to look that up, it'll tell you all about what gaslighting is, but it's usually creating a situation for a person to believe that doesn't really exist. And a lot of times they're so out of touch with reality because they believe they can sing really good. They believe they can write the best. They believe that their IQs are really high. Like, my daughter thinks her IQ is 170 and that she's more intelligent than Einstein or Tesla put together. And she constantly thinks this way. And she said that there was very little we could teach her when she was growing up because uh, she knew so much more than we did. And she practically had to raise us because she was born with such intelligence that she had to teach us things in order for us to relate to her. And it was just like that, and it still is. She still believes those things. And that's the 9 symptoms of borderline personality disorder. To be diagnosed with it, you have to have 5 or more of those. And our daughter happens to have, unfortunately, all 9 of them. And it's a really hard thing to live with. We finally had to find her a place of her own to live. We started out by finding her an apartment, and that didn't work out. We wanted to rent her a house, and that didn't work out, so we finally had to buy her a house to move out into so that she would have a house of her own. And if she had any fits or had any anger, she could act it out in her own house, and she wouldn't be here destroying our stuff and destroying things and making us destroying our feelings. And it's worked out pretty good, but we still, on a lot of occasions, have trouble with her. And I'll discuss more of that too in future videos. But right now, I want to talk about the conditions surrounding her birth because I have heard that borderline personality disorder is not genetic. I've heard that over and over again, so I wondered if it could be a birth defect. I had a really, really hard labor with her. It lasted 48 hours and 17 minutes. And they took her with forceps and they bruised one eye and the base of her skull. And I wondered if maybe that was what caused her to be this way eventually. She did make really, really good grades until she was 13, and then that's when all the problems began. She started having this mood swing problems and her elevated feelings of herself and all the things that I just talked about. Feeling alone, overindulging, all these things she started to do. And then when she was about 16, one of her good friends committed suicide, and that kind of upset her too, to a great degree. I know that sounds like it's putting it mildly, but it really did affect her and still affects her today, and she hasn't been able to get over it. But my point is, I think that at her birth, something happened that might have damaged her brain in order to have this disorder later on in life. And the older she gets, the worse it gets. And that's the problem with BPD, is that they don't get over it. They can learn to control it. It's not impossible and it's not hopeless. Even though when I first started studying about it, it seemed hopeless to me. But if they get into treatment and take their medications, they will be able to live a normal life. But it's very, very difficult to get them into treatment. And it's very, very difficult to get them to admit that they have been diagnosed with this. That's the toughest parts, is to get them to do that. And that's what we're working on now. And in the next video, I will tell you more about that and recommend some books that I have read, like the I Hate You, Don't Leave Me book. That's a very good book that tells you about borderline personality disorder. It explains it real well, and I do recommend that you either read it or find it on audiobooks, because I don't have very good eyesight because I had cataract surgery, so I listen to audiobooks, and they really help me understand this disorder, and I'm still learning. I think you spend your time learning, you spend your life learning, but the more you learn, the better it is, and you find ways of trying to deal with these people. And in future videos, I will discuss that too, ways of trying to deal with them. Because when I was first starting out with this, I didn't know how to deal with it, and I couldn't find any information on telling me how to deal with it. And that was tough, because I've heard of the disorder before, but I didn't know to what degree of seriousness it was. And it is serious. And sometimes they can have other conditions with it. They can be bipolar with it. They can be a rapid cycler bipolar. They can be a narcissist. There's other conditions that can be with it. And to get the diagnosis, please visit a doctor. Please go to a nurse practitioner or somebody who is very well trained in this disorder to get a diagnosis. Don't take my word for it. Don't take a friend's word for it. Go see a medical professional. I can't emphasize that enough. I am saying these things to try to help you, but to get a diagnosis, you must visit somebody in the medical field, especially somebody who is a specialist in this area. And if the BPD is somebody you love, it would help very much if you could find a counselor or therapist that specializes in BPD, so that they can help you deal with it and they can teach you about it, because that helps me quite a bit, because I found a therapist that helps me deal with trying to help my daughter and trying to help myself, because a BPD will blame you for the shooting of Lincoln. They blame you for everything. And it may not be true, but they will find things to blame you for. One thing my daughter does is that she chastises me for being a rotten mother, and that her childhood was awful. But if you were to ask her sister the same question, she would say, my childhood was uneventful. So they could be very, very different from other siblings. So I'm really glad that you watched the video to this point, and I hope that you will watch future videos that I release, and I will try to release them often so that you can get the information you need. And I try to study things, and I try to research them before I make the videos so that you can have the most accurate information. And once again, I will tell you that I'm not a doctor, I'm not a therapist, I am not a nurse practitioner. I am a nurse, but to find a diagnosis, please visit a medical professional. And I will see you in the next video. Thank you. And don't forget to subscribe to the videos and put a like button on it and ring the bell so that you can be notified of future videos. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time.